All right, welcome back, 10th grade. We are starting Unit 4 in World History, and this is mainly about ancient India and ancient China. So let's get started. India is a land of great diversity. In its topography is the physical features of the land. There's a lot of variety. They have one of the craziest climates here on Earth, and it has quite the unique population. So it is a land of diversity, and it is a study of contrasts. So, this triangular subcontinent extends from southern Asia into the Indian Ocean, and it forms a giant peninsula. Its terrain varies from subtropical rainforests to barren deserts to coastal plains to the highest mountain range in the world, the Himalayas. And between the rugged mountain regions in the north and the coastal plains down in the south, where the fertile valleys are, there are two great river systems, the Indus and the Ganges. So, like the Mesopotamian and Egyptian cultures, the earliest Indian civilizations began along the riverbanks. The first inhabitants of India probably settled in river valleys along the Indus and Ganges River. These people must have felt secure from invaders and foreign influences because of the Himalayan mountains and the waterways. They had the tall mountains and other barriers as well. But even though India is one of the most isolated civilizations, and it stayed that way for a long time, which is why their culture is so unique, eventually it would not remain an isolated land. Throughout its history, we will see different merchants coming in, different foreign invaders, some wandering tribes that come in. So India became a land of many people, many customs, and many languages. So, India derives its name from the Indus River, and that's because the first Indian civilization flourished along the fertile banks of the Indus River. So much of our limited knowledge of this civilization has come from the excavations of two leading cities that were there. These were carefully planned cities. They had wide, straight streets lined with brick houses. Evidence indicates that these cities had elaborate drainage and sewage systems that were more advanced than those in most of modern day India today, which is kind of crazy to think about. So, although there is a great distance between India and the Near East, the early inhabitants of India carried on trade with Egypt and Mesopotamia. And we know from archaeological evidence that the Indus civilization ended suddenly. And so they think it's probably by an enemy invasion. It was at this time that a warlike people called the Aryans migrated to the Indus Valley. So the Aryans came across Central Asia sometime around 1500 BC and subdued the non-Aryan people of northwest India. So many historians believe that the Aryans were related to tribes that were invading the Near East, Greece, and Rome at the time. The Aryans were herdsmen and they kept large numbers of cows and horses and big animals. And um, even though they left no cities behind, and there's not much evidence, one of the biggest thing that the Aryans left in the Indus civilization was Sanskrit. Sanskrit is became the new language of India. So the Aryans gave India the Sanskrit language. And our knowledge of the Aryans and their influence on Indian society comes not from archaeology, but actually from a collection of religious literature known as the Vedas, meaning knowledge. Uh, Now, the Vedas was their religious book. And preserved in the Vedas are early traditions and religious beliefs of the Indians, which were orally passed down from one generation to the next. So, from Sanskrit language, we gain insights into the Aryans' way of life, which became the basis for Indian culture and tradition. And this formative period of Indian history lasted from 1500 to 500 BC. All right. So, we need to look at the key features of Indian society. India has one of the oldest cultures in the modern world. The basic characteristics of Indian society described in the Vedas have changed little from the ancient to the modern days. So, the family has always been one of the most important social units in India. The extended or joint family includes the children, grandchildren, wives, and close blood relatives of common ancestors. The oldest male of the group was the dominant authority over the family, and married sons actually did not establish their own homes, but they would remain in their father's or grandfather's households. And each family member had specific duties and obligations, and the interests of the family came before the interests of the individual. So parents chose the spouses for their children in order to maintain the family's position and honor in society. Now, unlike the inhabitants of the Indus civilization who dwelt in cities, the Aryans settled in small rural villages. So, family groups living in a village were governed by a headman or a council of village elders. And for the most part, the villages were independent and self-governing. Over the centuries, though, village life has remained still a vital part of Indian society. Most people in India today live in pretty small villages, um, and much of their ancestors did over 2,000 years ago, which is crazy because we often think of the crowded cities of India. And while that is the case, and they are growing, and we are getting further from the small village life, there's actually so many people in India that the majority are still living the small rural village life. Now, there is an important factor in Indian society that it is necessary that we talk about, even though technically it has, by law, does not exist. It is still a part of the psyche of Indian culture. So come with me on this, or come with me on this topic. Imagine living in a country in which your status in life was determined the moment you were born. India was, and in some ways still is, that country. Its population was divided into rigid social groups called castes. The Indians formulated strict rules governing the life of the members of each caste group, where they lived, what their career could be, what they wore, what and whom, uh, what, like whom they could marry, who they could be friends with, what they could eat. For instance, marriage was forbidden outside of one's caste. You had to marry someone in your caste, so you stayed in it. There were four major classes within the caste system. The most important group was the priest, called the Brahmin. Next in rank was the warrior and the rulers, followed by the merchants and traders. The lowest class group was the Sudras, composed of servants and serfs. Outside the caste system and at the bottom of even the Sudras were those that are labeled the outcasts or the untouchables. And they performed the most menial tasks in society. Members of the caste structure avoided the untouchables. Mere contact with them was considered defilement. Um, and while anyone could improve their status within their caste, they still could not change their caste. Thus, in this system, there was little change in the village and family life of India. Economically, at points, it almost stagnated. And eventually, they developed hundreds of subdivisions or subcastes. And this explains in part why Indian society remained virtually unchanged for thousands of years. Now, if you look at those jobs in that pyramid, while every job has its place, you'll notice that while the untouchables outcast jobs are not everyone's favorite jobs, they are the jobs most vital to life and clean life, right? They're jobs that we should be thankful that people are willing to do or able to do. Um, there's a respect in that type of work. So it's kind of an interesting commentary on their value system. Sorry, I just want to see something here. All right, I think we're gonna go through Hinduism and Buddhism and be done for the day. Hinduism is ingrained in the way of life for the vast majority of Indians. It developed from India's early culture and traditions, their social structure, their literature, their arts and customs. And it has not only preserved the traditional elements of India's past, but it's also served as a unifying influence in India's diverse society. Because Hinduism has no formal statement of doctrine, it was able to absorb its into a system of belief of wide variety of having a wide variety of gods and religious concepts found among many people in India. So, because they have no formal doctrine statement, they can just keep on absorbing other gods and religious concepts. Very pantheistic. Hindus believe all religions to be equally true and equally false. It's kind of one of their phrases they say. So, which is kind of a conundrum. Today, over 80% of the people of India are Hindu. The basic tenets of Hinduism are found in the religious literature of ancient India, namely the Vedas and the Upanishads, which are like philosophical essays elaborating on the teachings of the Vedas. Hindus believe that a great god called Brahman permeates everything in the universe. And the Hindus acknowledge many gods, all deities, however, are considered only manifestations of the eternal and unchanging Brahman. So, since Brahman is not a personal being, he is often referred to as the great soul or the world soul. And the ultimate purpose and goal of every person, according to the Vedas, is to reunite his soul with the world soul. And this is done through the process of reincarnation in which a soul passes through many states or rebirths before it escapes the physical world and unites with Brahman. So, this cycle of rebirth is called the Wheel of Life. The Hindus believe that a person's deeds, or AKA their karma, in this life determines their status in the next. If he has lived, if someone's lived a good life, like his good works outweigh their bad, is kind of how they say it, then you may move to a higher caste in the next life. So the soul of an evil person may be reborn into the lower caste or even as an animal, which is why they don't kill cows in India. So, by observing the religious rituals prescribed by the Hindu priests and by fulfilling the obligations of his caste, a Hindu believes that he, through repeated rebirths, can ultimately gain release from the wheel of life and attain union with the world soul. So, not in today's video. I don't think we have time, um, but we will kind of answer this question about how does Hinduism align with what the Bible teaches? Start thinking now, based off what I just explained. What does the Bible say that de rebuttals what we just learned about Hinduism? I think I'll make a specific video for that. Um, so let's look at Buddhism, and then in the next video, we'll talk more about how does Hinduism or Buddhism align with the Bible. So you'll see that there are some overlaps in Hinduism and Buddhism. You can come back to this slide post-Buddhism if you want to see even more, but let's explain Buddhism and then we can come back to how they compare. So India was also the birthplace of Buddhism. The founder of this religion was Siddhartha Gautama. Later, we would know him as Buddha, or aka the Enlightened One, is what Buddha means, the Enlightened One. And at the age of 29, Gautama became troubled over the misery, poverty, and death that he saw in the world. He became convinced that he should devote all his efforts to finding the way of deliverance from suffering. Therefore, he renounced his life of luxury, gave up his princely heritage. He also left his wife and child, and set out to find peace and true happiness. I hope we're already starting to see issues. After spending 6 frustrating years living as a hermit in self-sacrifice and meditation, Gautama was at the point of despair. Sitting down under a tree, he vowed that he would not move until the truth came to him. According to him, he was pondering the questions of life when he realized the truth and attained enlightenment. So, central to Buddha's teachings are his Four Noble Truths. One, suffering is part of all existence. Two, suffering is caused by selfish desires. As long as man craves pleasure, possessions, and power, he will have sorrow and misery. Three, suffering can be overcome by destroying selfish desires. Four, if a man follows the Eightfold Path, he will destroy selfish desires and end all suffering. This pattern for living includes correct beliefs, intentions, speech, conduct, livelihood, efforts, thoughts, and meditations. Buddha also taught that belief in a soul or a self led to suffering. If there is no soul or self, then a person is less likely to crave things for himself. In Buddhism, the person is an ever-changing combination of forces that carry the impressions of a single person. Though there is no person to be reincarnated according to Buddha, the effects of people's deeds carry on from life to life. Bad actions will have bad effects, and good actions have good effects. The goal is to achieve nirvana, which is changeless reality with no suffering. Since there are no souls and nirvana is not a place, nirvana is not the equivalent to heaven. It does stand in contrast, however, to the present ever-changing world. So there's quite a few doozies in there. I want you to ponder these two religions, see where they are, where they intersect and where they don't. Um, we'll talk more about how the Bible addresses these religious systems. All right, we're going to end there today. Have a great day. I will see you later.